Hello, this is Scott Ferguson, Principal Architect in our GRC practice. Today we're going to talk about policy and compliance. Starting with our policy overview dashboard here, someone's going to want to track, well, how are we doing with compliance to those individual policies and those authoritative documents? So when I look at my dashboard, the first thing I'm going to notice here is that I have visibility into what's compliant in the organization, maybe what's outstanding. What I want to focus on, though, are these non-compliant controls. And if we drill into that, I see a list of controls that are non-compliant. And this is a pretty bold statement to be able to say that, this server is non-compliant with that policy without some sort of continuous monitoring or some way to be able to prove that it's non-compliant. If we drill into one of these specific controls, and I'm going to look at this deploy software patches for my load balancer, let's get to how the fact that I knew that this was non-compliant. What you see here at the bottom of this particular form is a couple of different things, right? And we're going to see that we've got this identified issue where it says that something has failed, and we have to understand what it is that has failed. So within ServiceNow, for that continuous monitoring, we have something called an indicator. And an indicator is the ability for us to actively evaluate data within the ServiceNow platform. So think of this for segregation of duties. If I had a control that required in change management the requester and the implementer to be two different people, that is an indicator that I could actively monitor. If it had to do with project management and I had a control around from a stage gate perspective to make sure that there was an approver on any project that was over a certain dollar figure, that is a continuous monitoring indicator that I can evaluate. Or even a security data, right? So whether it's an undesirable configuration setting or changes or vulnerabilities, these are all things, or security incidents are all things that I can continuously monitor. Now, for this specific control that we're looking at here on deploying software patches within the environment or on this particular server, well, it would make sense that the indicator that I would use would look at vulnerability data. So if we drill into this specific indicator, we're going to validate that patches have been deployed within the environment. So the first thing you'll notice here, and we're going to evaluate data that exists within the platform. And you can see here in my supporting data tab, I want to look at my vulnerable data, right? I want to look for fields like, well, when was it first found and what's the impact to confidentiality, integrity, and availability? And I'm going to wrap that up in the conditions or the criteria that says, well, if I have a vulnerability whose vulnerability score is greater than 6, it's an open vulnerability, the last time it was found was more than a week ago, and it's a complete loss of either confidentiality, integrity, or availability, that is a really bad situation. That's a bad thing. And now we're we're at risk of being exposed to WannaCry or TorrentLocker or one of these different things in the wild today. So in this scenario, if we find a vulnerability that matches this condition, we want to automatically mark this control as non-compliant, putting the state of that asset in a non-compliant state and being able to prove that we're non-compliant to that particular server. So let's see this in action. What I'm going to do is, because in most cases, the vulnerability data is being scanned or discovered by some other solution, a Qualys or a Tenable or a Rapid7 or one of our great partners in the vulnerability space. So I'm going to bring that data in from one of those providers, probably on a weekly basis. So on a weekly basis, on Monday, I'm going to look for a failed condition that meets this particular criteria. And if we look at, now I've got this running every single week, and if we look at the one that ran 3 days ago, on December 4th, we see that this particular server has a known CVE that was first found in July, was found again in August. It has a critical score, and it's a complete loss of availability. That vulnerability exists in my environment today, and it's been there for some time. This is a bad situation. So you notice now that my indicator passed box is unchecked. And if we back up from digging into where we were just at, we'll see that now my indicator says the last passed result is unchecked. And if we look at the control was automatically set to a status of non-compliant, and it generated this issue. And the issue is that actionable record that is signed to the control owner that alerts them to the fact that, hey, something is happening in your environment. This is going to show up on their dynamic dashboard, right? This is us automating that monitoring process, right? Saving significant time where they don't have to look at the dashboard on a regular basis. All of a sudden, this issue gets created. It gets assigned to them. It shows up in their My Work queue. And we can see here, Byron, who's the owner of this server, now has a task assigned to him, significantly saving time. Right? He has this task. He can see, in this case, my deploy software patches control has failed. I can see what that's been tied to. I can even see the indicator result. In this case, the one that ran 3 days ago found that indicator, and that's the cause or the root of what's generating this particular indicator result, right? Or this issue being assigned. He can now take corrective action. What we'll see when we look at our compliance overview dashboard is now Grace, our GRC auditor, our GRC compliance, our risk manager, has the ability to see not only just from a policy perspective where we're compliant, but also has the ability to see, where are we at from a compliance perspective for those different regulatory documents, right? How are we doing against PCI, or how are we doing against SANS or NIST? But they also have the ability to have see across all of those individual things, in this case DoD or COBIT, by the different policy statements, where are we compliant and non-compliant? And they have this dashboard that they can use to now make decisions around compliance for their organization. So thanks for spending the time with me today to go through policy and compliance. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to check out our website for additional information.